Hey, how you doing, everyone? This is Alfred from Practical Code Academy. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how you can create this beautiful image slider where you have some controls over here. You can actually go to the next image on the right, or you can go to the previous image by using the lift button here. And in this example here, I have 5 images down there. And you can see when we scroll through the images or slide through the images, you will see that the image here will be visible. However, the rest of them, they are like blurred images. You can also select an image instead of this controller. These images are controllers as well. So if I click in any of this image, you will see it viewed over here, and then you can do the scroll again. So we're going to build this application from the scratch, and we're going to use vanilla JavaScript, and we're going to do the styling using just CSS3. Hopefully you're going to learn from this project, and let's get started. I'm going to keep this page opened, and I prepared a folder here. This folder have the images and 3 files, the markup file, the styling sheet, and the JavaScript file. I'm going to open this folder with a Visual Studio Code. As you can see, you will have images folder, and inside this images folder, you will have 5 images. They are named from image 0 all the way to image 4. And the naming here is very important since we're going to use this naming sequence in our JavaScript file. This is just a basic skeleton of a markup file, like HTML file. However, I linked here a CDN to the Font Awesome because we're going to need Font Awesome for these 2 icons here for the left and right. I also linked my styling sheet, which is style.css, which is currently empty. I also linked my main.js file, which is the JavaScript file that I'm going to use for this project. Before we start, the way I'm going to plan to do this whole thing is going to be my main section. And it have 2 separate sections, which is the main image here, or the main slider, you can call it, section 1, or the first section. And then you can have another section here where it's going to show all the images. So the whole app consists of 2 different sections. One for the main image viewer and the other one for the image selection down there. That's for just the markup. So you can follow up with the markup that I'm going to write. So I'm going to start with the main tag. And this main tag, I'm going to give it a class of container. And as I mentioned, it's going to have 2 sections. The first section will be having a class of image container, and I will have another section. And this is going to be for the image grid. Let's start with the image container. And the image container, technically, only if you take a look at it, it will have only the controls here, which is like a left button and a right button, but I'm going to actually use links for that. So I'm going to start adding here the 2 links, which is not going to go anywhere. I'm going to give it a class btn to style them as a button. And this one is going to be the btn left. And going to add an icon here. And this icon will have a class of fa caret left. I'm going to copy this link. I'm going to change it to caret right. And it's going to be btn right. Okay, that's for our image container section. For the image grid, it will have just the list of the images. where now I can put my images, first one, and then I'm going to copy this tag multiple times, exactly 5 times for every single image. Perfect. And if I try to view that, since we didn't do any styling, these images are so wide and so having a big heights. So if I open that with the live server, you'll see that the images are so big. Some of them are small, and you will see our 2 icons over here. So what I will do in order, since we're going to start styling the container and the image container, I will comment this for now, so we can see actually what we're styling here. And let's do it side by side. And I'm going to start styling the container and the image container. So I'm going to go to my CSS file. First, I'm going to reset the browser default because the browser usually gives margin and padding for some elements. So I will select all the elements and I set the margin to 0, padding to 0, also box sizing to border box. And that's for resetting the browser. The next step is styling the body tag of the document, where I want to give it the height, 100 view height, give it the width, full width, 100%. And I want to display it flex. And the reason I want to display it as flex, because as you can see, we center everything here horizontally and vertically. And we can't do that since we give it a width and height. Now we can display it as flex, and we justify the content as center and align the items center as well. So it will center everything vertically and horizontally. So we want to display it as flex, align items center, justify content center. And you should now see our icons in the middle of the screen, and that's fine. You'll see now that display flex is working correctly. Now what I want to do is I want to start with a container which is holding, this is the container which is holding everything technically, and I want to do it as a responsive container. As you can see, when I increase the width of the page, you'll see that the space here will be equal to the space here, no matter how the screen getting bigger. And the trick that you do that, you use margin auto. Margin auto will always, since you give the width of this container a fixed width, in that case, I'm going to use max width. So it cannot exceed that max width, but it can be less. As you can see, it's getting less. I'm going to give it a max width of 900, and I'm going to do the margin auto, where the browser will distribute any extra white space from the left and the right equally. So let's do that. For the margin, I will do max width to give it to be a little bit responsive, 900 pixel. And the margin should be auto. I will also do some padding of 1 rem. And if you take a look at it right now, nothing should be changed. Now let's start styling the image container itself, so we can actually see some changes. So for the image container, in that case, the first thing, I want to style it first for mobile devices, not for a browser. Then I'm going to make it responsive by using media queries and check if the width, in that case of the width of screen, is bigger than certain amount, then I can style it for bigger screens. But initially here, I will style it for small screens. So for small screens, the height will be less. So it's going to be minimum height of 60 view height. Also, I'm going to give it a background of URL. Now I'm going to put my image. So this image container will have a background of image, where I'm going to select the images, and I'm going to select the very first image, and I'm also going to center it and make it cover and fixed with no repeat. Here we go. as you can see, you start to see the image. The reason this container, we should give it a width of 100%. And now we start to see the image. Perfect. And it should be responsive. If we increase here, you'll see it will be always centered. And if you go here in the mobile devices, you will always have this one rem. It's not going to cut the edge because we specify the one rem. Good. Now let's move to the next step, where I want to set some border radius, and let's set it to 10 pixels. I'm going to remove this extra. As you can see, we have now rounded corners. And after the border radius, I'm going to give it some shadow, like box shadow 0, 0, 10 pixels, RGPA of 0, 0, 0, 0.4. So we get like a little bit shadow here. Can actually do 20 pixels. So it's gonna go give more blur for the shadow over here, 0x and 0y. So you're gonna go in over all the 4 directions. Good. So we did the shadow here. The next step, this image container, I want to display it as well as flex. The reason I want to do it flex because now this 2 icons or this 2 binds here in that case, I want to display them in the center and on the corners here. So I want to put all the space between them. So I want to justify the content space between, and I want to align them or align the items center of this image container. So I will start by display flex. And once I do display flex, I can do align items center. And notice now that it's in the center, both of them. And I want to justify the content space between. And you should see now one over here and one over here. Okay, perfect. Let's give it some padding of 1 rem. So I push them a little bit inside here. Okay. Now, this for mobile devices, it will work fine. Now let's work in a big devices where I'm going to do a media query, media screen, and the minimum width should be 768 pixels. In that case, my image container will have a minimum height of 70 view height. And now they're getting bigger here in big screens, getting taller. However, in smaller screens, the minimum height will be 60. So if the widths now break the 768 pixels, the height of them will getting bigger because we have a bigger screen. Okay, so it's a little bit responsive here. Perfect. Let's now start styling the spines here. And both of them, if you remember, we give it a class of btn. So now I'm gonna start styling both of them, btn. And both of them, I'm gonna give it a background color. Let's say white. I'm gonna give it a width of 50 pixels, height of 50 pixels. Good. And now I want to center the icon that's inside this link in the middle. And you know the trick, to center it in the middle, all you need to do is just display to the flex, align item centers, justify content, center. And now you'll see the icon here in the center. Notice that it have an underline because it's a link. So we want to remove this underline by text decoration. none. And you'll see the underline gone. Now we want to turn this to circle, and you can do that by border radius 50%. There you go. I have this extension that it keep adding this. Okay, now we have 50% here. That's nice. Now let's increase the icon size by simply selecting font size. I'm going to do 1.5 rem. Good. I'm going to do the color of the icons to be simply dark gray, which is 333. There you go. Now I have nice controller or controls in my image slider. What else I need to do here? I can give them a little bit shadow. It's not going to be viewing a lot the shadow here. I can copy the shadow that I use here and put it here. You'll see that they have shadow. Good. This is for the binds. Now I want to have some hover over effect in this binds. So I will have the btn hover, and simply what I will do when I hover over them, I'm going to switch colors. The background color will be the dark gray, and the color of the icon will be the white. So I can copy these two properties here. Background color will be simply 333, and this is going to be white. Now let's try it. When I hover over it, that's perfect. It's working. Now let's go back and try getting the images grid here, where you will see all the images down there with different sizes. And now we're going to style the image grid here. Dot image grid, which will contain all the images. We're going to give it a fixed height of 10 view heights, margin top of 1 rem. Good. And I want to first select all the images inside it to be having the height of 100%. So they're going to follow the same height as the parent. And here we go. So we have all the images. And now we can give margin left of 0.5 rem to give some space between them. There we go. No, actually, not margin. We're doing the image grid here. I want to display them as flex as well, so I can center them here. You can do that, or you can do text align center, and that will center all the images here. Yeah, that will do the same trick as well. So we want to center them here. For every single image, I want to give it a margin left of 0.5 rem. So give it a little bit space here between the images. I also want, when I hover over them, we'll have the cursor as a pointer. So I will do cursor pointer. And now I will have a pointer cursor. Give them some border radius of, let's say, 5 pixels. And also copy the same shadow here. So they will have some shadow down there. Now I want to set all the opacity initially to 0.3, so they will be transparent. As you can see, they are transparent. However, the first image only should be not transparent like that. So it should have the full opacity. And I can select the first image, and I can use the pseudo element first of type. So it's going to be the very first one. And I will select the opacity for it to be 1. As you'll see here, since we're viewing the first image, it should be selected in the grid down there. And that's it for the CSS. It's very simple, not too much CSS, and you will see our application is taking shape already. And it's very, very responsive. Good. But now, as you can see, the functionality is not working, so we need to work on the JavaScript side. To work on the JavaScript side, I will open my JavaScript main.js. And I will start by selecting the left bind and selecting the right bind. So I will do constant left btn, which is equal document dot query selector, and we give it a class dot btn left, and also select the right bind, which is equal document query selector and right, or btn right. Perfect. Also, I want to select the image container here, where we're going to view the images inside it. Constant image, let me call it img container, which is equal document dot query selector, and we're going to be selecting dot image container. Finally, I want to select all the images down there. So I will do constant images equal document dot query selector all, because I'm going to select multiple image, and I'm going to be selecting inside my image grid space. I want to select any image inside it. And this is how powerful query selectors are, because you can use CSS selectors here. And this is definitely a CSS selector. We're selecting all the images that are inside the image grid section. Okay, these are all the elements that I'm going to need in my JavaScript. Now I'm going to start by creating an array, call it images, and simply this array will include all the names of these files here, starting from image 0, image 1, image 2, image 3, image 4. So if you want to add more images, definitely you need to add it to this array. Just putting the names, no extension or anything. Image 0, image 1, image 2, image 3, and finally, image 4. Now I have the array here. I will set my counter, and the counter in that case, initially when the page render, it's going to be on 0, because this is the image 0, which is index 0 here in this array. So the counter is going to resemble the index of this array. Initially, the counter, and it's going to be a variable, not constant, because we're going to change that a lot. Counter will be equal to 0. Okay. Now, I need to create some functions that will help me here. For example, I want to create a function that will set all the images here, which is all the images, want to set their opacity to 0.3. So I'm going to call this function blur images, constant blur images, and it's an arrow function. And this function will do, it will select all the images as an array, will loop through them for every single image. And this image here, will, for every single image, we want to access its style, opacity, and we set it to 0.3. And that's it. That's what this function will do. So whenever I call this function, so for example, I call this function blur images here, and I execute it, notice that now all the images are blurred. Of course, I don't want to execute it here. Now, let's add another function, or the functionality, when you click on the left arrow here. So once you click on the left arrow, this function should be executed, and I'm going to call it move left. And it's an arrow function. So whenever we move left, we going backward in that array. So our counter will be decreased by 1. And also, we want to check if the counter is less than 0, because you probably in the first one where the counter is equal 0. And now if you try to increase it by 1, decrease it by 1, in that case, it's going to be a negative number. So if we hit with a negative number, that's mean we hit here. We want to start from the end of the images. So we want to set the counter to be the length of the images array minus 1, which is going to give you the index of the last image here. So we're going to restart from the last one, and we can decrease again over and over. That's if our counter reached to a negative number. Okay, now I also want to change the image here of this container. And I can do that by selecting my container, which is img container. And I want to style it where the background image will be equal in that case. Since the counter is the index of this array of the images, so I can use this array. So first I'm going to type in the URL, and I want to access my images folder, and which image to get the correct image name from this array. So I want to select the images array, and I'm going to use here the counter. So if images was counter 1, so the name image 1. Images was counter 2 is going to be image 2, and so on. And don't forget to put the extension, which is JPG. That's it. Now let's try it. So in order to try it, I will add an event listener on this left button here. So left button, add event listener. And now whenever the user click, I want to execute the move left. Let's see. As you can see now, when I move left, the last image now appeared here. And as I move left, it will view the images. Perfect. One thing that we don't have the functionality, so we can highlight the image that already viewed in our the image container here. To do this functionality, we can simply add one more line here. Images, we're going to select all the images. Here, we have an array of all the images, and the image element with the same counter, with the same index in my DOM, that's the one that I want to change its opacity to make it fully appearing. So now when I move over here, you will see now all these images start to have an opacity of 1. But there is one problem that I need to clear all the other images. And I can do that, but every time I click on this button, I want to blur all the images or setting all the images opacity to 0.3 except this one over here. So I can execute my function that I added the code for it up there. Save that, and as you can see now, while I'm going left, the image here will come alive, and all the other images will get to be transparent. Perfect. Now let's do the same, however, for the other button. So I'm going to create another function. I'm going to call it move right. Where I'm going to be increasing the counter. And I need to check my limit here. If the counter is bigger than or equal the last image or this array length. So if I reach to the last image here and I'm going to try to move after it, I can't. I should start from the beginning again. So if it's bigger than the images array dot length, then you should set the counter to be equal to 0 because you want to start from the first image again. Okay, now also I'm going to copy the same line here where we're setting the background. These two lines actually should be the same. So I'm going to put them down there. So the image container, we're going to get the corresponding image by using the container as an index in this array, and also we'll style its opacity to be fully appearing, not transparent. So now if I move that way, I can now move backward, and it's not working because I didn't add the event listener for it. So I will copy this here, and it's not going to be the left button, it's going to be the right button. And it's going to be move right. Let's save that, try to move left, then we move right, and it's working, but the opacity is not working. So let's fix the opacity. Same thing, we're going to clear the opacity here. We should clear it. Let's test it. Now it's working. As you can see, I moved this direction left. Now I can move to the right. You will see that here it's changing left and right as well. Perfect. Now let's add the functionality that when I click in the image, it will start viewing the image here in this viewer. To add this kind of functionality, I will actually loop through all the images down there and add an event. I will add an event listener for every single image if the user click on it. So I will select my images, and I'm going to do for each image. What I want to do is for each image, I want to add event listener. If the user click on it, then I want to execute this function where we're going to have access to the event object. And I'm going to need the event object in that case. Here, what we're going to do, we want to set the background of the image container based on this image source. So I can write that as image container dot style dot background image will be equal, and I'm going to add a string here, URL, and I need to get the image, that specific image, and I'm going to use get attribute to get the source attribute, to get the source of this image. So if I selecting this image, I want to get the source image for it. Once I get it, I will set this image container with the same image. I will set it's the background here with the same image that we have the source for this image. And that's it. And let's test it. Now, as you can see, once I click here, it will view the image. However, it's not visible down there. We need to adjust the opacity here to reflect that this is the image get selected. And that can be done by simply clear everything by blur all the images. So whenever you click on any one, all of them now, they are blurred. The opacity, they're somehow semi-transparent. But now this image that we're selecting, we have access to it from this img variable. I want to access its style, opacity, and I'll make it fully visible. So now if I click here, you see this image is visible. Click here, this image is visible, and so on. Okay, but we will have one problem. Let's say I select this image that's somehow in the middle. Now I want to move right. It should actually selecting this image, but it's actually selecting this image. Why? Because yes, you selected the image here and it's viewing the image, but you never updated your counter. So I need, as a final step here, to update my counter, but with which value? We need the index of that image. And we can easily get the index from the for each function, because the second argument here is the index. And I can use this index, so I can put the index here as my counter. So now if I selected the image here, and I select to go to the right of it, now as you can see, it will select this image. And if I go to the left, because now the counter is get updated value from the index of where these images are. Here we go. We have the final image slider, and it's fully responsive and interactive as well, where the user can interact with by selecting the image from down there or using the controllers over here. Well, I hope you liked the video and stay tuned for new videos